What's going on, everybody? Jesse here, and in today's episode, well, we don't have as much to show for what we accomplished at the end of this video as I normally try to have for you guys at the end of the video. If you remember, in the last video, we created this crafting window here in the bottom left and the crafting info window here in the top center, and those were just static on the screen. Well, we went ahead and when you close the inventory, now it opens and closes along with the inventory. But you're probably thinking, why did it take so long to do that? Why is this episode so long? Well, that's not the only thing we ended up doing. With these, though, I do want to mention that I mentioned in the last video how our HUD is not very performant, and I'm going to have to go back in a live stream and update it to be more performant. Well, we kind of got a head start on that with these two, so you're going to get an idea of what we do moving forward to update our HUD to make it better in performance. So yeah, just kind of follow along. You'll get that information in this one, but we also start the whole crafting system. We start to lay the foundations, some interface calls, and the craftable items and the parents and the jibs and the jabs and the shenanigans. We got it all in here. So sit back, and you probably noticed too that my voice is a little bit hoarse. I'm doing this is the second recording of this episode because the first time it had some corrupted files. So I recorded it again for you guys. Just so happens I'm sick. My throat's a little bit dry. So I apologize for it. If it sounds a little bit different, I'm going to do what I can so it's not a distraction to you. But sit back, relax, enjoy the video, and I'll see you in a minute.
Today's episode and others just like it are brought to you by the patrons listed on the screen. If you'd like to support the channel and future development, then consider visiting my Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can receive various benefits such as early access to my videos, project downloads, as well as personalized support. You may also want to consider joining the community by joining my Discord server, where you can receive help from me as well as the community. So come on over and be a part of the conversation.
All right, go ahead and open up your content browser here. I'm going to come up here to the content area, the main folder, and let's add a new folder. I'm going to call this enums. Open up the enums folder, and inside here, I'm going to add another folder. I'm going to call this crafting. And now inside of the crafting enums folder, let's go ahead and create a new enumeration. This first one, I'm going to call E_craftable item names. I'm just going to duplicate that, and I'm going to call this E_craft benches, and another duplication, and E_item category. All right, so let's go ahead and open up the craftable item names. And what this is going to be, we're going to end up having a data table with a struct. And in that data table, all the row names are going to have to be unique, right? In a data table, if you understand data tables, is the row names all have to be unique names. You can't have any duplicates in there. But that's how we're going to call some of the information that we're going to need for the craftable craftable items and things of that nature. So what this is going to do is this is going to be a list of all the names of all the different craftable items that we have. So the name that you put here will need to match the name that we have for the row of that item in the data table. Make a little bit more sense a little bit later, but this is going to be important. When every time we add a new item to be crafted, we're going to have to add the name here, as well as go into the data table, add a new row with the specific name, and then in the data table, you just update the information for that particular item. So because of that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a comment in here just so I remember that list of names of craftable items. This name must match exactly the name rows in the corresponding data table. So we're only going to start with a couple enumerators right now. The first one, we're just going to name this first one. This is going to be the default one. We're going to call this none, and then we're just going to add two more. This first one, I'm just going to call this one red berry bread, and on this last one, I'm going to call this one basic bandage. This is just going to give us a couple items to be able to test. I really probably should end up adding 3 here. We might do that in another episode or 2 when we start doing all the programming here, so that way we can just verify the way this is going to work. But yeah, that'll work for now. So go ahead and make sure you save that. Open up the content drawer and go ahead and open up the E_craft benches. And then from here, we're just going to add 3 enumerations in this one as well. This first one, we're going to name this player. And the second one, I'm going to call this one for now. You can call this whatever you want. I'm going to call this small bench. And the third one, I'm going to call large bench. Now, what this is these are the different type of benches, I guess you can call them, as I did here, the craft benches, the 3 different categories of what is needed to craft different items. So it depends on what you want to do with this setup. setup here, what I'm thinking is there is going to be certain items that the player can craft without being at a crafting bench. So, you know, certain things that, you know, basic food, like the first ones we're going to do here, it's going to be all on the player, so he can craft some raspberry bread without needing a crafting bench. But then there's going to be other items that require a small bench, and on the small bench, you'll be able to craft everything on the small bench, as well as what the player can craft. And then a large bench, this isn't going to go down. It's not going to be what can be crafted on the small bench. The large bench is just going to be able to craft larger items that can't be crafted here on the small bench, but it'll have its own set of items that can be crafted here. So that way the player will need 2 different benches to craft everything they need. And then plus what the player can craft will also show up when you open up a large bench. Now, there's multiple things you could do. One of the suggestions I threw into my chat in the Discord, if you haven't joined the Discord, link is down in the description. Go ahead and join us down there, and you can come over and you can help make decisions on the direction of the game and my videos. But anyways, the decision that was made, I guess, is that instead of having individual, like upgradable, like just a few tables here and have them upgradable to be able to craft bigger and better items, it has come out to where everybody decided that it would probably be, well, not everybody, it was actually a pretty close poll, but where we're going to end up having different benches for things you do. So like you need to go to a stove in order to cook food, or maybe a campfire to be able to do certain foods. And to make weapons, you need a weapons bench. To make tools, you need a tool bench, things of that nature. So we'll end up having more in here because that is the path in which my Discord members have decided that we should go. So anyways, that's what this is right here. So go ahead and add whatever you want in here. This will end up expanding in the future, but for now, this is good to get us going. So go ahead and open up the E_item category enumeration. So what this enumeration is for is this is going to list all the different categories that we're going to have for the different items that we're going to be able to craft in our system. So this list may be bigger, maybe smaller, depending on your game and your needs. But for now, I'm going to add just because I'm going to add 6 of them right now. And this first one, I'm going to name this none, food, tools, health, building, and weapons. And that should do it for now. There, like I said, there may be some more or less that you want to add depending on what your game is geared to do. And I'm going to add a little comment in here again, used to clarify what category an item belongs to for sorting and display purposes primarily. All right, so make sure you save all of that. All right, so back into the content browser here, I'm going to come over here now to the inventory and the items folder. And inside the items folder, we're going to create another folder here. And I'm going to call this one Craftables, and then open up Craftables. And inside here, I'm going to create 2 more folders. I'm going to name this one Food, and this one I'm going to name Health. Obviously, these will store the craftable food items. This will store the craftable health items. So now in here, we need to create a new blueprint. So just click Blueprint Class. And in the All Classes search field, I'm going to type Base Item. And there we go. We got BP Base Item. Select that. And I'm going to name this one BP_Craftable. Now, just like with the BP Base Item and the other children we've made of that, this is going to be the parent of any item that is craftable. So in here, we want to be able to set any variables or functionality that we want every craftable item to have. This obviously will inherit all the default stuff from the parent. So as you can see here, when we open it under class default, we have all the basic information that every item has. So we've got that here. So now we need to set a couple variables that are specific to the craftable items. So the first variable here, I'm going to call this one ingredients, because we need to list all the different items it's going to take in order to craft an item. So for its type though, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change its type to base item, BP base item. Now I'm going to make this a soft class reference. We'll touch on this quite a bit moving forward. I think I've talked about needing to go back through and do some refactoring of just the code, the UI, things like that. Things that we'll most likely end up doing in a live stream. Some things we're going to change to be soft class because it doesn't load the item into memory until you ask for it to be loaded into memory, and then as soon as you're done with it, it destroys it. Whereas if you create a hard reference, whether it's an object or a class, these are both hard references, by doing that, it's always loaded into memory. And if you're not careful and you have a bunch of those, you're gonna have a bunch of memory tied up to variables that you don't need. So soft classes are a little bit tricky to work with sometimes, but if you do it right, then you're going to save yourself some performance and free up some memory for you to use elsewhere. So I'm going to choose soft class reference. All right, and then we're going to change this type to be a map, okay? And it defaulted for me to be an integer. If it didn't default for you, then go ahead and change that to an integer. But what this is going to be is this is going to be a list. If you're not familiar with maps, you're going to become a little bit familiar with it as we start to work with it here. But the left side of a map is what's called the key, and then the right side is called the value. So in a map, a key, just like if you're familiar with the database, a key must be unique. We can't have the exact same name for multiple items in here. It's kind of a curse and a blessing for that, and you'll see that a little bit moving forward. But what we're going to do here is we're going to list an item that we need, a base item, any base item child that is an ingredient for this. And then the integer here will say how many of that item we need to be able to craft the item. So in my game, I'm not going to create anything that really has over 4 ingredients, and I'll talk about that probably a little bit more. But for right now, everything's going to be just a handful of ingredients, but that's how that map works. All right, so we'll touch on that. You'll get to learn that a little bit more moving forward. So the other variable here, hit the plus, and I'm going to call this one amount when crafted. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change its type back to be a single, and I'm going to change it to be an integer. Compile it so we can change its default value. Now remember, we're in the craftable parent, so anything we do here is going to be defaulted to all of its children. So we want to, the amount of when crafted means sometimes, I'm sure you've played a game before where if you craft something one time, you're going to get multiple of that, right? So if we craft, say, breadcrumbs and it needs 1 bread, you might get 10 breadcrumbs from that 1 bread, right? So then you would change that number here, but you're always going to craft at least 1 item. So I'm going to put a 1 here, so that way we make sure we don't have to set that 1 for every child we create here. We just set a default value of 1, and it will populate to all its children that we make from here forward. Make sure you compile and save everything. So I'm also going to give each of these a category of crafting. When all these pieces start coming together, it's going to probably help out quite a bit to make sure that you try to categorize everything. So these will go under the crafting category, just so it's just easier to sort when you're looking at class defaults here. So you've got this here. So if we compile it, there we go. You can see we've got the crafting here. Default, that's fine. We can leave the default as default, but crafting right there. So open up your content browser now, and I'm going to right click on the craftable parent and create a child. And I will call this one BP underscore craftable food. And I'm going to create a duplicate of that and go BP underscore craftable health. And then I'm going to take the craftable food and I'm going to throw it here into the food folder, move it. Same thing with the health, but in the health folder, move that there as well. So let's go ahead and jump into the food folder. And now with the craftable food, I'm going to right click on this. And again, this is the parent here. So if we open this up, food is going to end up having, you know, variables in here that some other items might not. So let's go ahead and call this one health, and I'm going to change its value or its type here to be a float. So now anything that is a child of the craftable food will have this health value here. So now I'm going to right click on the craftable food, create a child of this, and I'm going to call this one BP underscore red berry bread. And for now, that's all we're going to have in there. Open this up, and for its default values, I'm just going to throw a random number in here for health. We got 5. The static mesh doesn't really matter. I'm going to go cone. I thought I had other ones in here. I'll have to look for those. But anyways, I'm just going to go with the cone. Interact text. I'm going to say this is, and actually this could probably be set in the parent. I'm going to come back here to the parent. Like I said, some of this can be set here because it's probably going to be the same for most of them. So the interact text, this is going to be pickup. So when we hover over it with our vision actor from the player, it's going to tell us what to do, and we want to pick this up. Its display name, that can be different for each actor. So food, when you use food, you're going to end up eating it. So it's used action text. I'm going to say eat, and that should do it now for the default values. Actually, the health, we're going to set it's going to at least give you 1 health no matter what it is. So now if we come back here to the red berry bread, that should already be filled in for us. The display name, red berry bread. Okay. And this will make sense. We're going to make use of this in the info window that we created in the last episode. And then for its thumbnail, I'm going to import a couple images here. What I ended up doing was most of our icons are kind of scattered around, and I want to bring them into a little bit closer. So you can see here, I created just a couple new folders. Sorry, I did off camera, but it's nothing exciting. So it's in our content, inventory, items, and then I created a new folder called icons and thumbnails, and then an icons to have the new icons. These are my new ones here. I'm going to come back here. You can see where we've got the icons right here for food. I'm just going to select these, and I'm going to drag and put them into that new folder I created and go move here. So that way it gives us the redirectors. And just to make sure it's cleaned up, right click on content, fix up redirectors. Now I'm going to come down here to the new folder with the icons in here, and you can see the difference in here. I changed these right here. So let's go ahead and change these. What I need to change them to, really the only thing I need to change with these is put them under the texture group of UI. And the new images I brought in, I also made BC7. Close that down. And then same thing with the red berry icon. I'm going to change it to texture group of UI. Make sure you save everything. And there we go. So now we have everything into this folder, but these are the new ones I brought in. With this red berry bread, all I did was I took the bread icon, threw it into Photoshop, took this berry icon, and I made these a little bit smaller and just kind of scattered them over the bread. I just needed something. And then this bandage icon I just found online. It says, I forget what game this was actually for. This is for a different game I found on a wiki. I just took that one. I'm just repurposing that one. So that's where that's at right there. But just find some icons that you can use. It's not a big deal. Eventually, all this is going to change anyways. This is all just for prototyping. So now that I have those in here in the red berry, I'm going to change the thumbnail for the red berry bread to be red berry bread texture. The item description, I'm just going to give this something basic. This is a yummy berry bread, and it provides a small amount of health. Type whatever you want. I just typed it in here, gave it a little bit extra right here because this is what's going to be put into the info window. So I just want to do that as an example. And amount when crafted, we'll just leave that as 1 for right now and call that one good. So compile it and save it. So now inside the content browser, I'm going to come over here now back to the craftable folders, open up the health. And for craftable health, I'm going to create a child blueprint of this, and I'm going to call this one BP_basic bandage. Open this up. And again, if we come back out here to the parent of the craftable health, I'm going to set a couple default values here. We need to add, actually, let's open up full blueprint editor here. Just like we did with the food, I'm going to add a health variable here because when you use a bandage or a health item, it's going to give you health. So we need to know how much health it's going to give you. I'm going to make this of type float and compile it so we can create a default value. I'm going to give it a default of 1. That is fine. And then for the class defaults, again, we can set some default values here. So its interact text will be pick up, use action will be, we're just going to call this one, I guess, use for right now. If you can think of a different descriptive word when using a health item, then put it there. Maybe heal, something like that. You could put as, we'll do that. We'll put heal for its use action text. Thumbnail is blank, description blank, and the rest of it, if you want to set these, you can change that as well. Billboard, actually, I will change the billboard for this. I want to keep it as the bread. I didn't do this for the food, but I'll do that off camera just so it has a default texture right there. You can leave it as the dinosaur if you want. So now if we go back into the basic bandage and compile it, we should see all the default values here. Health value defaulted to 1, so it's static mesh. I'm going to do the capsule. Already have that. Its name will be basic bandage. Thumbnail will be the bandage icon, and this is a basic bandage that does a small amount of healing. There we go. And don't forget, you can change the stack size here. Stack size for me for now, 1, that is fine. Obviously, these will probably be stacked a little bit more. Same thing with the red berry bread, but that's it. So now we have that all set up. So now we have these ingredients that we have to deal with. So let's go ahead and set up some ingredients. So now when setting ingredients for these, it's actually pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. There's many ways you can end up doing this. Really, we could put this in our data table if you want and have everything there, but I've been trying to keep everything localized, which is the why I use all the objects and things like that. I want to rely as little as possible on a data table as I need to. So right here, we've got the basic bandage for its ingredients. Hit the plus icon. When it comes to a map, you can't enter multiple without updating each one. So it cannot add a new key because it's still in its default value state. So its default here is none. Now it's going to show all the list of the BP base item types in here. So you can see there's quite a few in here that we don't want. We don't want craftable health. We don't want craftable food. We don't want the craftable parent right here. So we don't want those in here. So what we should have done, if we come back over to the craftable food, the parent of the food, select class settings, open up advanced, and we've got generate abstract class. Select that, make sure you compile it. Craftable parent, same thing. Class settings, abstract class, compile that. And the last one we'll have is the health. So if we open that up and go class settings, advanced, abstract class, compile that one. So now if we come back here to the basic bandage and look at the class defaults, now we have the list of ingredients. If I drop that down, all those disappeared, which is perfect. That's what we want. We want though we don't want those ones to be selectable. So for this, even though we don't have the actual things that would otherwise create a bandage, I'm just going to create some basic ones for testing using the items we do have available. So I'm going to choose the bread. We need bread in order to craft this. Well, how much bread do we need? We need 2 breads, and then I'm going to add another ingredient here. And this one, I'm going to do red berry, and we need 1 red berry and 2 bread in order to craft this item. So the nice thing here about not being able to have the same key here is if we choose bread, it tells us duplicate keys are not allowed in the map property. So that's what's kind of nice. Obviously, we don't want to have 2 ingredients of bread, because if we need that, we just increase the amount here. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense right there. So go ahead and compile it. So now that's the ingredients we have for this. Again, you can change the amount when crafted if you want, but for me, that's good for right now. Again, all this is going to end up having to change once you move forward. This is all just for prototyping purposes. So now let's go to the red berry bread and do the same thing. First ingredient here, I'm going to open this up, and obviously the first ingredient is going to be bread. And I'm going to say that the amount to be crafted, we only need 1 loaf of bread because, well, we're making 1 loaf of bread here, right? That we're getting 1 loaf of bread. So maybe if you wanted amount when crafted to be 2, then you'd put 2 bread right there, but this is going to give us 1. And I'm going to add another ingredient, and obviously we're going to need the red berries. And for this, I'm going to say we need 3 red berries in order to make this bread. So that's going to be the cost to make this bread. So when it comes down to game balancing, when you're doing things like this, you go, okay, a bread provides you with 3 health, 1 berry provides you 1 health when eaten. So 3 times 1 is 3, plus what did I say here? 3 health for a bread. So that's a total of 6 health if you were to eat them individually. So to balance this out, you would want to make sure that it's worth crafting this item. So you would want to be higher than 6 health when this is crafted. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your game balancing. But game balancing is going to be ways down the road for anybody really at this stage of the game process. All right, so there we go. Now we have our default value set. So let's go ahead and create the struct and data table that we're going to need for this crafting system. So I'm going to open up the content browser, and I'm going to come up here to the content folder, and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this one crafting. And inside of this crafting folder, let's go ahead and right click, blueprint, and blueprint structure. I'm going to name this F_craftable items. Go ahead and open this up. And for the first variable, I'm going to call this one category. I'm going to add another one. We're going to change the types on these in just a minute. I'm going to add another one, and I'm going to call this one craftable item class. And a third variable, I'm going to call craft bench. All right. So for the category, we're going to go category and item category. That's what we want for this one. The craftable item class, I'm going to come down and I'm going to find the craftable, the BP craftable, and I actually may end up coming back and changing the name of this to be Craftable Item. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do that really quick. There we go. I changed the name of that. Just make sure you come up here to content again, just to make sure it fix up any redirectors, because changing names and moving files is what adds redirectors into your folder structure, into your files. So again, back with that now. If we come up here to the Craftable Item class, search Craftable again. There we go. Craftable Item, soft class reference. And then the third one, the craft bench, will be the craft benches. Select that one. So what we're going to end up setting in here is this will be this item, which bench is going to be required in order to do it. And then obviously category, hopefully that's self-explanatory, but it's going to be what category does this item fall under. So that should do it for now. We may end up adding some more down the future, or down the road somewhere in the future, but right now I don't see us doing that. I've already developed this crafting system and I do it with just these 3 variables here. So we'll see as the game progresses. You may have to come back and add some stuff, but for now that's good enough. So let's go ahead and open up your content browser. Now again, we're inside the crafting folder next to the craftable items struct, and now I'm going to add a new miscellaneous up here to data table. Select data table. Now it's going to ask which struct do we want to use in order to do that. I'm going to look for craftable items, the one we just created. Select OK, and now I'm going to call this one DT_craftable items. Go ahead and open that up. So now in here, this is just all of our information that we created before. So it's all, it just comes together. So now we're going to be able to call from this as we need to. So let's go ahead and let's create a couple rows in here. So I'm going to add a row. Okay. And I'm going to expand these out just so I can see what is going on in here. We want the row names to open up, category, item class, that's fine. So everything's set to default. So category is none, craftable item is none, and the crafting bench, the first one, which is player. So right here in the new row, this is the name that has to be unique. So if we come back here to the craftable item names enumeration, we've got red berry bread and basic bandit. Now remember, capitalization matters. Spaces matter. Everything we have here has to match. So I'm just going to take this first one so I make sure I don't mess up my typing. Even if it's messed up in here, it's going to be messed up over here, but it's going to be recognizable. So I'm going to copy that, come in here, I'm going to double click where it says new row, and I'm going to paste that name in here. Okay, and I'm going to create a second one, and I'm going to do the exact same thing for this one in here. Now, obviously, starting out, this is going to be a little bit more of a pain in the neck than when you just add things individually, because you'll be able to just add them and then just copy them over and bring them over. It'll be a little bit easier. Control V, basic bandage. There we go. So now if I select the first one here, the bread, the red berry bread to be specific, category, this is going to be category of food, craftable item class. Now you could put this category on like the class, but this is going to be an easier lookup for us. And you'll see that this is going to be an easier lookup for us as we go to display the information in the widget. So now the craftable item class, this is the actual item itself. And this is going to be the BP red berry bread, and the craft bench. The player is going to be able to craft this, so we want to leave that defaulted to the player. Now the basic bandage, this is going to be in the category of health. Craftable item will be the basic bandage, and again, we're going to leave this on the player for testing purposes. And that's it for the data table. So let's go back now to the content browser. And in our crafting folder, I'm going to add a new blueprint class, and I'm going to make this an actor component. I'm going to call this one AC_crafting. This is going to be our crafting component. We're not going to do any work in this today, but we just kind of need this here to be set up. So just one of those extra things that we're going to have on hand for us when we start doing the coding. Make sure you go ahead and save that now. So now let's head on down to the interfaces. We're going to focus on getting the widgets to open and close as they need to now that we got the main craftable stuff set into place. So go down to your interface, inventory, and on the interact HUD. Now remember the interact HUD, we've got the interactable. This is one we use when we're actually interacting with interactable items, the objects, the world items that are in the world. But the interact, this is kind of our default one. The player has this one. We use this to be able to call functionalities on our actor with its components, whether it's the inventory or the crafting component at this point. And there'll probably be more in here, like maybe attributes, things like that. So you can have multiple interfaces for all that if you want, but then you just have to add them. Sometimes that might be good if you want to use one set of interfaces on one actor, but not the other. But for us, for right now, all we've got in here is inventory stuff. So let's add some crafting stuff. So I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to add a new function, and I'm going to call this new function function, open crafting window. All right, hit enter. And now I'm going to add some categories here. We talked about this just a little bit. I'm going to put this one under the crafting category. And then I'm going to go through real quick in the rest of these are all for the inventory. So I'm going to add them to an inventory category. All right, this is just going to make adding or finding things that we need a little bit easier. So just try to get in the habit as you move forward, just to use the categories for your things. All right. So now that we have that, so what do we need for this? All we need for the input on this is I'm going to go bench, and we're going to make this of type E_craft benches. So we just need to know when we open the window exactly which bench this is coming from, and we'll set it up to where even if it's the small bench or the large bench that's coming through here, or whatever other bench we end up having, it's going to also add the player bench in here, but it could just be the player bench that's coming through as well. That's not a big deal, but we need to know which bench it is, so that is good. So go ahead and compile and save that now. So now I want to jump on over to the primary HUD. I've already got the window open up here in my tab, so I'm going to go to my primary HUD widget. All right, so I think I said something about it at the beginning of the episode, but either way, in the last episode, I had mentioned how the UI is actually not performant. It's not operating the best it should for performance reasons, because even though we're hiding all these widgets when we close our inventory, they are still being drawn, and it's still taking up those resources. Plus, anything that we have in here as far as references go, it's holding those references, hogging memory resources that you might better use elsewhere. So we are going to come back in a later time. Most likely I'll end up doing it in a live stream, and then everybody can just kind of either join there and we could talk during the live stream, or you can just go back and replay it just to see exactly how I optimize it. But today I'm going to take a step in the right direction, and we're going to at least optimize the crafting window and the crafting info window. And the way I'm going to do that here is I'm going to start out by opening up the panels section right here, and I'm going to grab a horizontal box. You could do this with a vertical box if you want to. It doesn't really matter. There's only ever going to be one item that are stored in these, so it doesn't matter if it's horizontal. I'm just going to use horizontal, and I'm going to drop it on the canvas panel. And then again, this organization doesn't really matter at this point, but because this is going to be, I'm going to use this horizontal box to be able to store the crafting window. So I'm just going to take it and I'm going to put it in the same general location that the crafting window is at. All right, so now I'm going to change the name of this, and I'm going to call this the crafting window box, and then make sure is variable checked, because we're going to want to add children to this, or a child to this. Okay, and before we do anything with that, I'm going to add another horizontal box just like I did with the last one. I'm going to take it, and this is going to be for the crafting info window, so I'm going to drop it right there. And again, I'm going to change this name similar to like I did before. The crafting info window box is variable. Okay, so let's just compile it and get it there. So now before I delete these other ones, what I'm going to end up doing is with the crafting window box, and we're going to do this with both of them, but they're going to be different information. So with the crafting window box, we need to set some of its default values over here, the same that we have the crafting window in this particular instance. Next one will be the crafting info window. But if we select the crafting window, you can see here any item that has this is something that we've changed. There's a couple that actually have it. It doesn't go to its default state, so it might not be in there. But this is generally, whenever you see this, this means you changed some of the information here. So I'm going to change that information for the crafting window box. So I'm going to come back here, and I set the anchor for this one to be top center, right? So then we come down here. So now the X is 50, and the position is -410, 50 and -410. And excuse me, the crafting, I'm like, why did it shoot way up there? Because I was thinking of the crafting info. It's actually the bottom left corner. So let's go ahead and enter those values again. 50 minus 410. There we go. Now it lines up properly with the crafting window. Sorry, I was thinking right there. So so we've got that now in place. So now with the alignment, we want it to be 0, 0, and then just select size to content, and it's just going to disappear. So now let's make sure that we have everything set up. So yep, size to content. The size doesn't matter because we're sizing the content, and then these three were changed. The proper anchor was selected. So now really we can come into the crafting window, and we can delete this. So I'm going to get this off of the screen. All right, we still are left with our crafting window box. So now we come to the crafting info box, and again, we're going to want to set the values just like we did for the last one. So with this one, we've got a top center anchor. Position is 0 and 84. The alignment 0.5 on the X, and size to content. So essentially the same thing, just a couple different values. So let's go ahead and change that now. Top center 84, alignment 0.5. So that way you can see the 0.5 centers it up right here on the window, and then size the content, and it's going to collapse down just like the last one did. And that should do it. Just verify before you delete it that you didn't change any other variables or settings. Did not. So I can go ahead and delete this one now. There we go. So now we're left with our two boxes right here. So let's go ahead and do some work so we can get the crafting windows inside of this box. So now let's go ahead and do some work so we can get these boxes to show back on the screen. So now in the event graph of the primary HUD, you can see here we've got the info window box that we just created, as well as the window box. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to actually put these in a category. Again, that seems to be a theme: organization. Try to stay organized. I'm going to put it in a category of crafting. Do the same thing with the window box. And then off camera real quick, I'm going to take these other ones that are for the inventory and I'm going to put them in a different category just for them. You don't need to see that. All right, so now we need to create a new function. So come up here, hit the plus button, and I'm going to call this function show crafting window. Now the info window and the main crafting window, they're tied together. If you want the crafting info window, then go ahead and follow everything I've done to this point. But if not, it's not that big of a deal. But the info window can't survive without the main crafting window, just as we move forward. But just kind of keep that in mind, that they're one and the same. And while we're using this now to be able to show these windows when we open and close our inventory, down the road when it comes to making the game a little bit more user-friendly and doing better UI, chances are likely for me, and you may even want to do this down the road too with your own projects, is you may want to have separate tabs to be able to open up the crafting or even the crafting info window. You may not want that displayed all the time. So that'll be set up down the road. But for right now, I want these on the screen. This is all prototyping. So as long as you get the functionality into place, generally speaking, then it's really easy to go back and do the little touch-up things that you would want to be able to put as polish on your game. So with the show crafting window, I'm actually going to add a variable, input variable here, and I'm going to call this B is enabled. So just like we've done with the other ones, we can call this function in both the opening and the closing state and do different things. So I'm going to add a branch here at the beginning. And is it enabled? If it is enabled, what we need to do is we need to open the crafting window, or we need to create a crafting window, create widget crafting window. Now, in the crafting window, I want to add a reference to the primary HUD. So I'm going to open up this particular widget, open that up. And in the event graph, I'm going to add a new variable, primary HUD. And of course, this is going to be of type primary HUD widget. And we're going to make this an object reference. And then with this, I'm going to make it instance editable, and I'm going to expose it on spawn. So go ahead and compile that now. So now if we come back into our primary HUD widget and right click on this create widget node and refresh it, there we go. We got primary HUD. So now I'm going to add a reference to self because we are in the primary HUD. And I'm going to plug that in right there. So we're going to pass that along. It's going to help us out a little bit down the road. Just a good way to pass pointers back and forth between widgets. But remember, by doing this, we're adding memory usage in the system. So just be mindful of that when we're doing this. But we kind of need this moving forward. Or we can add an interface. Don't really need that. We could add an interface and just call it here. But even with an interface, you still kind of need a reference to this, which is found on the player. But either way, I digress. So now this is in the true branch. So on this now with this widget, we want to save the reference to this widget, and we're going to make this a hard reference, but that's fine because this reference is not going to leave this HUD. So when we destroy this widget, we're also going to destroy the pointer to it. We're going to release its memory manually. Okay, so I'm just going to right click on this and promote to variable. I'm going to call this one crafting window, and I'm going to put it in the category of crafting. So with that now, I want to take the crafting window box and I'm going to add child to horizontal box, not the regular add child, the add child to horizontal box. And then I'm going to just pull off of this set and I'm going to put it down into the contents. So that's what we're adding to it, is what we just created, right? And now let's go ahead and create another widget, and this will be of type crafting info window. We don't need any input parameters at this point with it. So just plug that in. So again, we want to be able to save this one, promote to variable, crafting info window. And then with that, grab the crafting info window box, draw it down and go add child to horizontal box. easy stuff. And then the child we want to add, again, just plug this in. So for now, this will end this part of the function. So add a return node. Blueprints is smart enough. You don't need a return node, but you should always be in the habit of returning whatever you call for. All right. So you got to send in a return node to end the function. So now if we're not enabling this, in other words, we're trying to remove it, grab your crafting window. Let's get it. And we want to remove from parent, right? So we're going to take this off the screen. This destroys the object. Think of this as like a destroy actor. We're destroying this widget. And then just to make sure, like I said, we're going to manually make sure we no longer have a reference to this. This should automatically, once we do this, go to null pointer, but widgets are a little bit different when you destroy them. So I've had some issues with that in the past. So I just want to make sure that this crafting window, that we no longer have a reference to this. So I'm going to clear this out. So I'm just going to put it in here and set it to null. I'm not going to put anything in here, so that way it's going to delete any pointer we have to this widget. Let garbage, because sometimes garbage collection doesn't collect when you think it does, right? So just because we're destroying this doesn't mean it's actually out of memory yet. You have to wait for garbage collection to come and collect everything that needs to be destroyed and get rid of it. So when it comes to garbage collection, you have some minor adjustments you can make to when it collects garbage, but generally speaking, it doesn't do it a whole lot. So as like you would think. So just whenever you have something like this, feel free to just set the null pointer. We want to make sure that we get rid of that. So it's same thing, but with the info window box, the info window, we want to remove this one from parent as well. And again, let's go ahead and set this variable so that way we make sure that it's no longer pointing to anything. And again, the return node to wrap it all up. So before we get out of our primary HUD, I'm going to head over here to the function close. Where is it here? Close menu. Let's open that up. And now we need to be able to close the inventory. So we just made that pretty easy for ourselves. And we've got the show crafting window, and we've got this in here. We could just set this to false and it's going to close it. Now we can't just plug this directly into right here. We could, and it's going to work. So right now, if I call it, it's going to open it. Well, I won't open it, but it would close it down. But the problem is we don't open the crafting window every time the inventory opens. And this is all called, or this close menu is called every time we open and close our inventory window. So example being, if you open up the storage unit, it's not going to open your crafting window, but it's going to call this every time we try to close that window, and you're going to end up with errors. So what we need to do is we need to run a check in here. So I'm going to grab our crafting window and I'm going to check, is this valid? And I'm going to do the macro here with the question mark. Essentially, this just adds the branch for us. You could do the other one, but then you got to run your own branch. So if this is true or is valid, then we want to go ahead and disable this. But if we don't have anything stored in this variable, then we don't want this to be called. And then hook up the is not valid to the return node right there. And that should do it for us for the primary HUD at this point. So go ahead and compile and save it. And now let's go ahead and open up the player character. One of the things I'd like to touch on before we do anything here is one of the discussions we've had recently in the Discord channel, link down in the description, is the where things really kind of belong. And honestly, this inventory and soon to be the crafting actually probably not too big of a deal. It will be the way we're doing it. But these things that have information that is important to us, such as your inventory and what you're carrying, things like that, should probably belong on something like the player controller. I know it seems kind of odd. Why would it go on the controller if you're trying to, keep things logically where they belong? This should be on the player because, he's carrying the backpack or whatever. The problem is when the player dies or when you change levels, the player pawn, the character, is respawned, which means it gets an all its variables go to default, everything connected to it, all its components, all its variables, they all get reset to default. It gets an all new begin play. So you're going to lose all that information. Now, your player controller is actually persistent. You die, you only get one controller per session. So when you die, your controller follows you. So everything on your controller stays the way it was. So that's why logically it would probably go there. However, the way around this, eventually you're going to have a save system in your game. So what you can do is on death or on level change, you can run your save game commands and store all your information in there before you kill your character, before you actually change the level. So in other words, before the new character is spawned and started all over from scratch. And then when it does load up, you reload all that information back into your player. And while that seems like a whole lot more work, it is technically a whole lot more work. But if you're going to have a save system in your game, which most likely you're going to have in there anyways, that's the exact same thing you're going to do regardless if it's on your player character or your player controller. You're still going to start the character every time with loading that information that you've got stored into those components and variables and things of that nature. So just keep that in mind, that if you're just running this as a prototype and you don't have a save system up yet and you're switching a level, or you die and you haven't set up that save system yet and all your variables get reset, that is why. So in that case, you would probably want to move it to your player controller. So with that said, just keep that in mind as you do your programming. It's good to know that how all of the base classes are handled inside Unreal. And some of those links, you can find those again over in the Discord channel. I have pinned those into the channel so you can find some information on how each of those class works. So one of the things I want to do here, you can see this is starting to get a little bit crowded. Off camera real quick, I'm going to do a little bit of commenting in here, and I'm just going to kind of organize this a little bit. So give me just a second and I'll be right back. All right, there we go. We got a little cleaned up there. Not a big deal. One thing I do want to kind of do here is, I don't know if too many people understand that you could do this. It's not that big of a deal, but it kind of helps out with organization, as long as you remember that this is how you're doing things. I'm going to add a new graph here. Right now we got the event graph. This is our main graph. Everything defaults to this main graph, and even if creating a new graph, everything's still going to kind of default to this event graph. But I'm going to create a new graph. I'm going to hit the plus button here, and I'm going to call this one crafting graph. And all my crafting functionality, I'm going to put inside of this graph. So we have created this interface call under crafting called open crafting window. So I'm going to double click that. But like I said, everything defaults to the event graph. So how do we get this over to the crafting graph? Well, I'm just going to hit Control X on it with highlighted, Control X to cut it. Come over here to the crafting graph and then Control V and paste it in there just like that. Now, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. But again, if you look here, we're only started on this. We've only got the inventory and the start of a crafting system. And you can see how cluttered this is going to get eventually moving through as the game gets bigger. So just trying to stay organized. So creating a new crafting graph isn't that big of a deal. Just remember, if you're creating new crafting functions, to put it inside this graph just so you stay nice and organized. So with that, what we have now, the only real functionality we're going to have for this at this very moment will be to show our crafting window. So when this interface is called, we need to grab our primary HUD, the reference to our primary HUD, right? And then now we need to show crafting window. And since we are opening the window, we need to go is enabled true. And that's all we have for that right now. This should actually now show our window, but we still aren't calling this. So come back over here to the event graph. And now in the open inventory input, over here where we are opening the player inventory, I'm just going to go ahead and create a little bit of extra room in here. So I'm just going to grab all this and just kind of move it over. And off of this, I'm going to call the open crafting window. So when I start to type this in, you can see we get two choices here. One, you can see it says target is BI interact HUD, and the other one is target is BP true first person. Now it doesn't really matter which one you call, it's going to do the same thing. Because we're calling this directly on ourselves, I'm going to choose target is BP true first person, because there is, using interfaces, there is a little bit of an overhead to them. It's not nearly as bad as some other things, but there is a little bit of overhead to it. Now don't overthink that too much, but it's just the little things that matter. You could choose either one you want, but I'm calling this directly on myself. So in my head, I think target is BP true first person is the one I want to call it on. Okay. And now, since we're calling this on ourselves, I'm going to send it as the bench, as the player. So now for some testing, you can come back and you can actually choose which bench you want to do this, and we'll do that for some testing a little bit down the road in our next upcoming videos. But for now, this is being called on the player, so I'm sending the player across. Now we're going to be able to call this from our crafting benches and things of that nature. We're going to be able to call this interface call. That's why we made it an interface call. We're going to be able to call this interface from pretty much anywhere else because this is on the player character, and it's going to call this. So by doing that, we can send the bench across. Now we're not using this right now because we don't have any update functionality going over into the HUD, but we will again in the upcoming episodes. That's how it's going to end up being. So one last thing I want to touch on before we test this out is over here in the event graph where we added this open crafting window. I'm creating this crafting window in such a way that it's only looking at the player's inventory when it comes to deciding what to craft. That's intentional game design that I chose. Now you can go the other way in your game. You're more than welcome to go the other route. You can make it to where when you open your storage inventory that you're crafting with when you're checking, because we're going to end up checking ingredients obviously in the upcoming episodes to see if we have what is needed in order to craft the item. It's only going to check the player's inventory. This crafting window, as we just designed it today, it's not even going to open when we open our storage. So if we come down here and open storage inventory, this isn't even getting called. That's why we put this right in here. It's only being called on the open player inventory. So if that's something you want, then you're going to have to code that yourself. It is going to be a little bit more work. It shouldn't be too horrible. You can come over to the Discord and I'll do what I can to try to guide you in the right direction if you need help, if that's something you really want to do. It shouldn't be too bad. You just got to kind of logically think about it, and you've got to pull all your inventories together and just get it. I would suggest, if that's something you want to do, make it through my next few upcoming videos and figure out how I'm doing the crafting system in general. Then you can go back and you can revisit how to just incorporate a second inventory if it's available. So when you open up your storage unit, to check that as well. It may be something I do down the road, who knows, because the way I designed the inventory system is it can be dragged on anything and anything can have an inventory, right? So we can also do that with our crafting benches. The crafting benches might be able to have a small amount of inventory that you can store in there. You know, that's just something. It's up to your game design and what you want to do. But I just want to let you know that I'm designing it in the way to where it's only checking the player inventory when crafting an item, and that's why this is set up here like it is. All right. So now let's go ahead and hit the compile everything. Make sure you have it all compiled, and then let's hit the play button, cross our fingers, and make sure everything works out properly. All right, so first sign is good. We don't have anything shown on the screen, which we did at the beginning. So we hit tab, and there we go. We get our windows popping up. Now, obviously, nothing does anything at this point, and I know this is very, you know, anticlimactic, I guess, but you can see this is still a relatively long video, and this is really all we seemingly accomplished, but there was a lot of underlying work that we got prepared for the next upcoming videos. So those will be a little bit more involved. We've got a few videos in front of us before all of this is finalized, but I hope you guys are getting excited for this system and can kind of see it progressing now and how it's going to be handled. And I actually, at the time of this recording, I just finished the entire system with the exception of the crafting benches, but that's going to be pretty easy to incorporate. But the entire system itself is fully functional, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm pretty excited about it, and I can't wait to share the rest of it with you guys. So please stay tuned. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you want to see what else this channel has to offer, then go ahead and subscribe while you're down there liking it. And if you want to be updated when I upload the next videos for this crafting system and beyond, then go ahead and hit that notification bell as well. And until the next episode, peace.